Ethan Matthews had what most people only dreamed of. His corner office overlooked the city, the skyline stretching endlessly, gleaming under the morning sun. Every morning he poured his coffee into a pristine mug and took a slow sip, watching the streets come alive below. He smiled, thinking of the meetings, the deals, and the accolades awaiting him. Emails flooded his inbox, praise, opportunities, clients seeking his expertise. Colleagues admired him, sometimes even envied him, and Ethan had learned to accept both with grace. On paper, his life was flawless. Friends were loyal, or at least they appeared so. His fiancée Clara seemed like the perfect companion, beautiful, intelligent, and always encouraging. Everything aligned, the apartment, the career, the social circle. Yet beneath the calm surface there was a tension he refused to acknowledge, a fragile balance that only success could mask. He thought he was untouchable, that no mistake, no betrayal, no human flaw could reach him. The truth, however, is that no one is immune, and sometimes life has a way of revealing cracks just when everything seems perfect. Ethan was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Evenings were a different world for Ethan. The high-rise office lights faded into the backdrop of the city as he returned home. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and vanilla candles, a small sanctuary from the chaos of work. He and Clara shared dinners with friends, laughing over stories of their day, swapping jokes and toasts. Occasionally they would have quiet nights alone, just the two of them, lying on the sofa and watching the city glow through the windows. Ethan felt safe in these moments, cocooned in the illusion that everything was permanent. But life had a way of hiding its cracks beneath the laughter and the polished smiles. Behind his confidence, doubts occasionally flickered, moments he ignored, thinking success could shield him. Yet, in that very apartment filled with warmth and joy, life was preparing to pull the rug from under him. A single misstep, a whispered word, and the world Ethan had built would come crashing down. He did not know it yet, but the storm was closer than he imagined, ready to challenge everything he thought he controlled. At first, it was subtle, almost invisible. Hallway conversations that died when Ethan approached, sidelong glances that carried unspoken meaning, and laughter that seemed to hide secrets. Emails arrived with missing attachments or vague critiques, but he brushed them off as mistakes. Meetings that were supposed to be routine suddenly became tense, filled with pauses and loaded glances. Ethan trusted his judgment, he trusted his team. Yet, someone was watching him closely, someone patient, meticulous, and calculating. This person planted seeds of doubt quietly, ensuring no one noticed until the damage was done. Rumors grew like shadows in dark corners, creeping into social media, whispered at lunch tables, and murmured in elevators. Ethan felt nothing at first, just small annoyances, but each moment stacked onto the next, eroding his confidence slowly. He couldn't yet see the betrayal for what it was. In retrospect, the signs were obvious, but in the moment, they were just noise, easy to dismiss. By the time he realized, the storm had already begun brewing, ready to strike when he least expected it, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. The gala was supposed to be a celebration, the pinnacle of the year's accomplishments. Ethan walked into the grand ballroom, confident, polished, dressed in his tailored suit. The room glittered with crystal chandeliers, the laughter and music masking the tension that no one could yet name. Then it happened. An email, scandalous and cruelly timed, leaked to the media. Screens lit up with accusations, and whispers circled like predators. Cameras flashed, capturing Ethan's stunned expression as colleagues avoided eye contact, unsure where they stood. Every moment felt like it stretched, unbearable in its intensity. One by one, friends and coworkers drifted away, and the man who had been untouchable was suddenly exposed as a fraud in the public eye. Questions hung in the air, accusations spread, and the weight of humiliation settled over him like concrete. For the first time, Ethan understood what it felt like to be truly powerless, stripped of reputation and respect in a single devastating moment. Overnight, the life he had carefully built began to crumble, and he had no one to blame but the very people he had trusted most. The next days were a blur. His email inbox overflowed with angry messages, clients canceled contracts, and social media erupted with judgment and speculation. His bank accounts were frozen, a legal tangle left him financially paralyzed, and every corner of his life felt like it was unraveling. Clara, once a source of comfort, turned distant, leaving Ethan to navigate the chaos alone. He wandered city streets feeling invisible and unwanted, the bustling world around him contrasting sharply with the emptiness he felt inside. Every laugh from strangers, every advertisement flashing past reminded him of the life he had lost. Sleep became impossible. Nights stretched endlessly as he replayed every detail, searching for answers he couldn't find. Humiliation weighed on him, pressing on his chest, making each breath heavy. Even the air seemed to mock him, taunting him with its indifference. He had lost not just wealth or reputation, but trust, stability, and love. The man who had once felt untouchable now felt fragile, broken, and exposed, standing on the precipice of despair with no clear way forward. Ethan returned to his apartment, but it no longer felt like home. The furniture, once comforting, now seemed hollow and empty. The walls, decorated with memories of success, mocked him with reminders of a life that no longer existed. The silence pressed in on him, making every sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, louder, sharper. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of humiliation and loss heavy on his chest. Even simple tasks like making coffee or checking messages felt impossible. Friends had vanished, colleagues avoided him, and Clara's absence left a gnawing emptiness he couldn't fill. He questioned every choice, every interaction, every trusting word he had spoken. Alone, Ethan realized the stark truth. Success was fragile, reputation fleeting, and trust even more delicate. The life he had built in the open world, full of laughter and admiration, had disappeared. And now, in the quiet, he faced himself. The doubts, regrets, and fears he had ignored. It was here, in the silence of his apartment, that he would begin the slow, painful process of understanding who he really was and how he could survive the storm. Ethan replayed every moment in his mind, dissecting them with ruthless intensity. Every meeting, every deal, every interaction with colleagues and friends was scrutinized. Had he been blind? Naive? Could he have seen the betrayal coming? He questioned his judgment, his instincts, even his worth. Nights blurred into days as he cycled between self-loathing and disbelief. Each thought left him more exhausted, more desperate, more unsure. He remembered the laughter in the office, the congratulatory handshakes, the praise that had once seemed sincere. Was any of it real? Had he been surrounded by people who genuinely cared, or had he simply been a fool in a carefully constructed illusion? The betrayal had not only shattered his career, but also shaken the very foundation of his identity. Ethan realized that to move forward, he first had to confront the truth, accept that his world had changed forever, and that nothing could be taken at face value again. This painful self-examination was terrifying, but necessary. In questioning everything, Ethan planted the first seeds of resilience, the faint beginnings of a plan to rebuild himself quietly, patiently, and deliberately. One rainy evening, as Ethan wandered aimlessly through streets reflecting city lights in puddles, a message appeared on his phone. It was from Alex, an old colleague he hadn't spoken to in years. "Meet me. I can help." Skeptical, weary, and unsure, Ethan hesitated but finally agreed. They met at a small, dimly lit cafe, away from prying eyes. Alex didn't offer empty reassurances or false hope. Instead, he listened carefully as Ethan recounted the fall, the betrayal, and the humiliation. Then he spoke calmly, with precision. "You're not finished," he said. "You've been knocked down, but it's not over. The key is patience, observation, and strategy. You rebuild quietly, where no one expects it." For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt a spark of hope. Alex helped him up the path forward. Small steps, calculated actions, rebuilding skills, and alliances, all while staying under the radar. This encounter marked a turning point. The world had taken everything from him, but with guidance, Ethan began to see a way to reclaim his life. Not loudly, not angrily, but silently, deliberately, and with growing confidence. Rebuilding life from nothing was humbling. Ethan took temporary jobs, doing work he had once considered beneath him. He learned to budget, to live simply, to appreciate small victories that once seemed insignificant. Cleaning his apartment became a ritual, cooking meals a meditation. Each act, mundane as it seemed, reinforced control over a life that had spiraled out of control. Every day, he pushed himself. Physical exercise, learning new skills online, reading books on strategy and resilience. He didn't brag, didn't announce progress, but each small success strengthened his resolve. Gradually, he noticed a shift in his mindset. He no longer needed approval, praise, or validation from others. He relied on himself. While the world outside judged, whispered, and gossiped, Ethan focused on what he'd control. The hum of the city became background noise to his quiet transformation. He learned to observe more, react less, and plan with patience. The man who had once thrived in public recognition now discovered strength in solitude. In the stillness, he began shaping a new identity, stronger, smarter, and ready for the day when he would quietly reclaim what had been stolen. The past haunted Ethan like a shadow he couldn't shake. Social media feeds reminded him of former colleagues, friends, and even Clara moving on without him. Headlines flaunted Victor, the antagonist, smiling at parties, closing deals, living as if Ethan had never existed. Each reminder was a stab to his chest, yet Ethan refused to let anger guide him. Instead, he observed quietly and strategically, noticing cracks in Victor's perfection. A missed deadline here, a careless email there, subtle weaknesses others overlooked. Ethan realized that his downfall hadn't erased his abilities or intelligence. It had only forced him into patience, stealth, and precision. He studied the city, his industry, and Victor's moves with meticulous attention. Every action, every decision was cataloged silently. While Victor thrived in public acclaim, Ethan thrived in preparation, building power in the shadows. The man who had humiliated him didn't yet realize that the greatest threat wasn't confrontation or anger. It was the quiet resilience of someone who had nothing left to lose but everything to gain. In solitude, Ethan's plan was forming, and when the time came, it would strike with inevitability. Ethan had learned the value of silence. He watched Victor carefully, tracking every move, every word, every interaction. The man who had once humiliated him now moved through the city like a king, but Ethan noticed imperfections others overlooked. Victor's arrogance, his careless decisions, the way he underestimated people. Each detail was a thread Ethan could later pull. He spent hours reading industry reports, following social media, attending events in the background without drawing attention. People didn't notice him, which gave him freedom to observe and understand. Quietly, he mapped Victor's patterns, his strengths, and more importantly, his vulnerabilities. Ethan realized that knowledge was power, and patience made it lethal. Each day, he grew stronger mentally, his mind sharper and more focused. He didn't rush. He didn't act impulsively. He allowed Victor to make mistakes, confident that the man's hubris would eventually work against him. This careful observation wasn't just revenge, it was preparation, building a foundation for the inevitable moment when Ethan would reclaim his life. The quiet observer, once humiliated, was now becoming a silent force to be reckoned with. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan's solitude became a crucible for growth. He studied relentlessly, finance, negotiation, strategy, and honed skills that he had once taken for granted. Physical exercise strengthened his body, meditation sharpened his mind, and reflection clarified his purpose. Every small task became a deliberate act of improvement, each moment a step toward reclaiming control. He learned to plan meticulously, anticipating outcomes, preparing for contingencies, and thinking several moves ahead. Solitude taught him patience, self-reliance, and resilience. The world outside judged, gossiped, and moved on, but Ethan's focus was unshakable. He no longer sought approval or recognition. His victories were internal, quiet, and powerful. With every challenge he overcame alone, his confidence returned, tempered by humility and experience. He realized that strength was not loud or public. It was built in silence, in preparation, in the deliberate shaping of oneself. Ethan's transformation was invisible to the world, but inside, it was profound. The man who had lost everything was quietly becoming unstoppable, ready to face the future without desperation, without anger, and with a strategy that would make his return inevitable. Ethan's efforts began to bear fruit in small, tangible ways. A freelance project, modest in scope but executed flawlessly, brought him praise from clients who appreciated his skill and professionalism. For the first time in months, he felt a spark of hope. He had proven to himself that his talent was real, that his competence hadn't disappeared with public humiliation. Every late night spent studying, every hour of reflection, every act of discipline had prepared him for this moment. The project wasn't flashy, but it mattered more than any accolade or social recognition. Confidence returned slowly, quietly, yet firmly. Ethan realized that true victory didn't come from defeating others immediately, it came from reclaiming oneself. Each small success reinforced his sense of purpose, reminding him that the man who had been humiliated still existed, stronger and wiser. While Victor continued to enjoy superficial success, Ethan's foundation was solid, built on skill, patience, and strategy. This first victory wasn't just a project completed. It was proof that his silent rise had begun, and nothing, not even the past, could stop him now. Victor, sensing potential competition, tried to sabotage Ethan again. False reports, misleading communications, and subtle manipulations were sent to clients and colleagues. But Ethan had anticipated this. Calmly, methodically, he countered each attempt with precision, never raising his voice, never seeking confrontation. Every move Victor made against him only strengthened Ethan's resolve. Observers, unaware of the conflict, saw only Ethan's professionalism and composure. Victor's arrogance was his weakness. He underestimated Ethan's intelligence and patience. This test confirmed what Ethan had learned during months of solitude. The strongest power is quiet, deliberate, and calculated. He didn't need public vindication. Results spoke louder than words. Victor, blinded by pride, could not see the subtle trap being laid. Ethan had become a strategist, understanding that revenge was not an emotional reaction. It was a measured process. By staying silent, by observing, by acting precisely when needed, Ethan proved to himself that he was no longer the man who could be toppled by rumors, lies, or public humiliation. The storm had passed, and now he was ready to reclaim everything that was taken. Slowly, Ethan's reputation began to rebuild itself. Colleagues and clients noticed his skill, his reliability, and his unshakable composure. Word of his work spread quietly, organically, without boasting or self-promotion. Unlike the past, his return wasn't dependent on social approval. It was based on competence, consistency, and integrity. People began to respect him again, not for the image he projected, but for the results he delivered. Ethan no longer sought attention. He sought mastery, and recognition followed naturally. Meanwhile, Victor remained oblivious, his arrogance blinding him to Ethan's silent ascent. Every new client, every successful project, every small victory contributed to a growing foundation that would eventually overshadow the antagonist completely. Ethan had transformed from the man who had fallen publicly to someone who could rise privately, strategically, and unassailably. The world would notice eventually, but by then, Ethan would be untouchable, prepared, and fully in control. The man who had lost everything in public was now quietly reclaiming power, one step at a time, proving that resilience, patience, and skill were stronger than noise, gossip, or humiliation. Ethan understood that talent alone wasn't enough. Quietly, deliberately, he began building alliances. He reached out to trusted professionals, people who valued competence over gossip, and cultivated relationships with care. Every conversation was intentional, every meeting planned. Ethan no longer sought friendship for approval. He sought connections for mutual respect, knowledge, and opportunity. He listened more than he spoke, observed more than he acted, and subtly positioned himself as a reliable, trustworthy figure. Slowly, a network of support emerged around him, composed of people who recognized his skill and integrity. This network was invisible to Victor, who assumed that Ethan had faded into irrelevance. Little did he know, the man he humiliated was quietly gathering resources, knowledge, and allies. Each handshake, each brief conversation was a step in a carefully orchestrated strategy. Ethan's rise was no accident. It was methodical, patient, and deliberate. While the world watched Victor's superficial success, Ethan's network and influence were growing silently, forming a foundation that would eventually allow him to reclaim what he had lost and surpass it, all without a single dramatic outburst. Opportunity arrived unexpectedly. A high-profile contract, one that could elevate Ethan's career beyond his previous success, became available. Instead of rushing, he assessed, planned, and prepared. Every detail mattered: client needs, competitors, timing, and execution. When the time came, Ethan presented his proposal with clarity, confidence, and precision, without boasting, without drawing unnecessary attention. The decision-makers were impressed. They recognized skill, preparation, and reliability. The contract was awarded to him. For the first time, Ethan felt a surge of quiet triumph. This wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. Months of patience, observation, and preparation had culminated in a tangible achievement, one that reminded him he was capable of excellence beyond public scrutiny. Victor, still basking in his own perceived superiority, remained unaware of the shift. While the antagonist relied on image and manipulation, Ethan relied on mastery and preparation. This contract was not just a victory, it was a turning point, signaling that his silent ascent was unstoppable. The world would soon notice, but by then, Ethan's position would be undeniable. The moment came when confrontation was unavoidable. A corporate meeting brought Ethan and Victor face to face. The room buzzed with anticipation, whispers circulating among colleagues. Victor, confident and arrogant, tried to intimidate with sharp words and subtle threats. But Ethan remained composed. Calm, collected, and deliberate, he answered every challenge with poise and intelligence. He did not shout, argue, or expose Victor's failures publicly. Instead, he let results and competence speak. Each measured response, each precise point highlighted Ethan's growth and mastery. Victor's facade of confidence began to crack. Anger flashed in his eyes, but Ethan did not respond with emotion. He responded with strategy. It was not revenge that guided him. It was control, preparation, and quiet superiority. In that room, the dynamic had shifted. The man who once suffered public humiliation now held power, not through confrontation, but through careful planning, skill, and composure. Victor, blinded by pride, did not yet see the full extent of Ethan's rise. The silent force was now undeniable, and the stage was set for the final reclamation. Ethan's strategy unfolded without spectacle. He never publicly attacked Victor, never sought dramatic revenge. Instead, he allowed Victor's arrogance to betray him. Deals failed, clients questioned his competence, and colleagues began to distance themselves. Each misstep, each careless decision reflected the consequences of Victor underestimating Ethan. Meanwhile, Ethan's own achievements grew steadily, quietly, and consistently. People noticed results, reliability, and mastery. Things Victor had overlooked in his arrogance. By the time the world realized, the antagonist was already unraveling, trapped by his own hubris. Ethan remained calm, observing without interference, confident in the inevitability of Victor's fall. This was the power of silent retribution. It was patient, invisible, and devastatingly effective. Revenge had been replaced by strategy, vindication replaced by methodical execution. In every failed deal, in every lost client, Victor felt the consequences of his misjudgment. Meanwhile, Ethan continued to excel, steadily reclaiming his influence, reputation, and authority. The fall of the man who had destroyed him would be complete, not through noise, confrontation, or anger, but through the quiet, deliberate, and unstoppable force of a man who had lost everything and learned to rise silently. Finally, the world began to notice Ethan again. His work, once invisible, now demanded attention. High-profile clients praised his skill, industry leaders recognized his expertise, and colleagues admired his professionalism. Unlike before, Ethan did not chase recognition. It found him naturally, flowing from competence, reliability, and quiet mastery. Victor, still struggling to maintain his image, watched helplessly as Ethan's reputation grew stronger, more authentic, and undeniable. The contrast was clear. The man who relied on image and manipulation was fading, while the man who had lost everything and rebuilt himself in silence was thriving. Public recognition was not the goal. It was the consequence of a carefully executed plan, patience, and perseverance. Ethan smiled quietly, knowing he had reclaimed not just success, but dignity, authority, and self-respect. The rise was complete, but achieved without theatrics, without confrontation, and without unnecessary noise. The silent power of resilience, strategy, and deliberate effort had proven stronger than humiliation, gossip, and arrogance. Ethan's return was inevitable, measured, and unstoppable. The city, the industry, and even Victor could no longer ignore the man who had quietly mastered himself and his world. Ethan finally understood that success was no longer about proving something to others. It was about proving it to himself. He sat in his office late one evening, city lights reflecting off the glass walls, and felt a calm he hadn't known in months. The storm of betrayal, humiliation, and doubt had passed, leaving only clarity. He no longer needed recognition, applause, or validation from anyone. The quiet victories, the careful strategies, the patient rebuilding, they were enough. He had learned that resilience was stronger than pride, patience more powerful than anger, and wisdom more valuable than revenge. The scars of his fall remained, but they no longer hurt. They reminded him of the lessons learned, the strength gained, and the man he had become. Ethan had reclaimed everything quietly, deliberately, and intentionally. The emptiness he had once felt in silence was now filled with purpose, confidence, and control. Inner peace was his reward, the knowledge that he was untouchable, not because the world feared him, but because he had mastered himself. The man who had lost everything had finally found what truly mattered: quiet strength, clarity, and the satisfaction of a life rebuilt on his own terms. Victor's downfall was inevitable. His arrogance, carelessness, and manipulations caught up with him. Deals he once controlled collapsed, colleagues abandoned him, and clients lost faith in his judgment. Every misstep, every reckless decision reflected the man he had become: fragile, insecure, and overconfident. Meanwhile, Ethan continued his quiet rise, demonstrating skill, reliability, and calm authority. The contrast between them was undeniable. Victor had underestimated Ethan, and that mistake became his undoing. The world, which had once cheered Victor's apparent success, now witnessed his unraveling. There were no dramatic confrontations, no public shaming, just the natural consequence of arrogance meeting competence. Ethan observed silently as the man who humiliated him faced the results of his own hubris. Every lost opportunity, every disappointed colleague, every failed negotiation was a reminder of the power of patience and strategy. Victor's fall was complete, not through anger or noise, but through the quiet and deliberate efforts of the man he had tried to destroy. Ethan had reclaimed his life while teaching the ultimate lesson: arrogance without substance is destined to collapse. After months of silent work, Ethan found himself reconnecting with friends and family. Apologies were exchanged, misunderstandings clarified, and bridges repaired. Relationships that had seemed broken forever were slowly rebuilt, yet the process was deliberate. Ethan no longer allowed blind trust or naive optimism to dictate his actions. He approached every interaction with awareness, calm, and careful judgment. The city that had once seemed cold and unforgiving now felt different. It reflected the man he had become: resilient, strategic, and strong. In reconnecting, Ethan realized that reclaiming life wasn't just about career or reputation. It was about trust, love, and authentic connections. He had rebuilt not only his professional identity, but also his personal world. The laughter that returned to his evenings, the warmth of familiar faces, and the simple comfort of shared moments reminded him that life could be rebuilt after devastation. What he had lost in public, he had regained quietly, thoughtfully, and fully. The man who once wandered aimlessly in despair was now grounded, secure, and in control, ready for whatever challenges the future might bring. Ethan's life had transformed. Professionally, he had surpassed his former success not through public spectacle, but through mastery, skill, and perseverance. Personally, he had rebuilt authentic relationships based on trust, respect, and understanding. The lessons of the past had reshaped him: patience over impulsiveness, strategy over reaction, and self-reliance over dependence. He no longer feared failure or humiliation, for he knew he could recover and rebuild. Each day was purposeful, deliberate, and measured. Ethan moved through the city with quiet confidence, aware of the challenges around him, but no longer intimidated by them. His apartment felt like home again, filled with light, warmth, and the echoes of laughter. The man who had once lost everything in public had now reclaimed life in silence, stronger and wiser than before. Success was no longer about visibility or applause. It was about authenticity, competence, and control. Ethan's new life was a testament to resilience, proving that even after the deepest fall, one could rise higher than before, fully prepared and grounded in self-mastery. Sitting in his office gazing at the city skyline, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He had lost everything in public: career, relationships, trust, but he had reclaimed it all in silence. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic confrontations, only quiet, deliberate effort, patience, and strategic mastery. The antagonist had fallen, not by Ethan's anger, but by his own hubris. Friends and family were restored, trust rebuilt, and respect regained. Ethan understood now that true power didn't roar, it whispered. Silence had been his greatest weapon, patience his ally, and resilience his armor. Every setback, every humiliation, every lonely night had been a lesson, shaping him into someone stronger, wiser, and unshakable. As he looked out over the city, the glow of lights reflected not just the skyline but his victory. He had proven to himself that life could be rebuilt, not through noise or revenge, but through determination, strategy, and quiet strength. Silence had spoken, and Ethan had risen. He was no longer a victim. He was a master of his own fate, untouchable and unstoppable.